talk to you about some of your experiences as a prisoner in Evansy and your liberation. When did you become a prisoner of the Nazis, and what were the circumstances of your becoming a prisoner?
Well, it started in Amsterdam, Holland. I went into hiding in January of 1943 because my parents, first my sister had been picked up and sent to Auschwitz to be gassed, which we didn't know. And my parents being the only other child left, my parents decided that I should be put into hiding. I went into hiding in Amsterdam, and I stayed into hiding until about towards the latter part of July 1943, at which time I was betrayed, and I had to leave my hiding place. And about 3 weeks later or so, I had been picked up on the streets of Amsterdam in Holland, and I had been sent off to Auschwitz. I stayed in Auschwitz until the 18th of January, 1945, and we went on a death march from Auschwitz in Poland to Laszlo in Poland, which was a railroad shifting yard type thing where the trains were reformulated before they went on. And we were placed in, that was now in a hard winter in 45. The winter, by the way, in Europe that year, 44, 45, as many of you guys know who went over there, was a very brutal winter. And so was it in Poland. And we were loaded on open railroad cars, no roofs on them. We had received no food or any drinks whatsoever, no water or anything. And we were loaded on those railroad cars and shipped to Mauthausen in Austria. And that took about 3 days and about 3 nights. By the time we got off that train, when we arrived there, close to 80% of all those who had been placed on that train had frozen to death or died from other causes. I stayed in Mauthausen in quarantine for about a week to 7 to 10 days, and was sent on to another concentration camp on the Danube, on Melk, which is halfway between Linz and Vienna. We stayed there until the Russians came closer again. We were loaded on barges and we were taken upriver to Linz. We were unloaded, given 2 loaves of bread, and then we were again death marched from Linz all the way to Ebensee in Austria in April of 1945. And we arrived there, I believe it was sometime around the 15th of April. Or it may have been a little bit earlier than that, but I'm not positive. But the dates at that point in my life were insignificant until we were liberated, which date I have never forgotten, which is Sunday the 6th of May, 1945. So, and the reason I was picked up in Holland was because I'm a Jew. That's all there is to it. It's that simple. And we were sent away to be exterminated, and I was very lucky to survive Auschwitz because of I had several lucky breaks there, basically to do with health, in that I reported one Monday morning to sick call and told them that I had very heavy pains, and the doctor knew, because he had seen me on the Thursday and Friday before, that I had an acute appendicitis. He called the doctor, the SS doctor, and told him that he had a 21-year-old youngster here, or boy or man, young man, with a 4-day acute appendicitis that was ready to burst. And the SS doctor told him to get me ready for operation because he had never seen an actual ready-to-burst appendicitis inside a human body. Only he had seen this in books. This, as I was told later on, by the way, by the doctor who operated on me, another fellow inmate. And that's why I'm alive today, because the SS doctor wanted to see what it looks like on the inside and ordered me to be operated on. And then, of course, in those hospitals there are no nurses. You cure yourself, you get an extra blanket, and you get an extra little bit of food each day. But otherwise, it's up to you to stay alive and make yourself well.
You were lucky you had appendicitis.
This was my lucky break. You know, when I went into service later on, and when I stood there, you know, stark naked as we all did, and at one time or another, and the doctor would say, "Who's the butcher that worked on you?" And I said, "Believe me, there was no butcher. There was a guardian angel." And then when I explained my story, he said, "My God, you're right." So that's how I got to Auschwitz. That's how I got to Ebensee, and that's how I met up with the F Company 3rd Cav on that Sunday in May, that first Sunday in May.
And then you actually became a part of the 3rd Cavalry.
Yeah, because I spoke some English, they immediately took me downtown to company headquarters, or, yeah, in fact, it's company headquarters. And I became an interpreter for them, and I began to soak up English like mad, like a sponge. And then when you guys were ordered to move on to Trieste, with the connivance of some of the guys in the tanks, I hid in one of the tanks and went on your route, and near Radstadt in Austria, you made your first bivouac halt, and everybody had to come out and stand there for roll call. And I showed up, and Captain Brennan got kind of ticked and said, "Max, we told you you can't come along. You know, don't make life difficult for us. We're going to go to Yugoslavia, and from there we may go home, and God knows what else they got in store for us. You can't stay with us. Go back." And so then I wound up with the 319th Infantry, 1st Battalion, headquarters company, and they kept me until I got an offer in Germany in 1946 to join the CIC, the Counterintelligence Corps.
The forerunner of the CIA.
Beg pardon?
That was the forerunner of the CIA.
Well, it was the, actually the OSS was the forerunner.
That's right.
Of the CIA, but Counterintelligence Corps also became part of it to a degree, and then they were yanked out again. They're still part of the Army. The Army still has a CIC Corps to this date. So, and then I came to the United States on the 30th of September, 1946. So I had full duty, actual duty, just like any other agent, except that I was not an American. I had no dog tags. I had no nothing of that sort. I wore the same uniforms as anybody else. I even had a .38 snub-nosed revolver, like every agent. And I pulled duty there from approximately, I think it was February until I came to the United States, which was, as I said, September of 46.
And then what happened when you came to the United States?
Well, it was a very difficult adjustment period for me because I had no relatives here. The colonel who had brought me over was the commanding officer of the headquarters company, 1st Battalion 319th, Colonel Clark, who died a few months ago. And he and his wife sponsored my coming to the United States. And they lived in Buffalo, New York, and I went up there. And I had a very difficult adjustment period, so by the time that the next spring rolled around in 47, I enlisted in the Army. And I felt, in those days, the rarity was that they had only 18-month enlistments, which was the least that you could join up. Everybody wanted to get out, and very few people wanted to get in. And so they made these short enlistment periods, and I took advantage of that, went into the service, so that I could think myself through. Should I stay in the United States, go back to Europe, you know, and perhaps begin to understand the United States a little bit better? And that's what I did. And I came out, and with the GI Bill that I had amassed, which wasn't much, I went to the university at George Washington in Washington, D.C. After I had taken the equivalent exam for high school students, which I evidently passed with flying colors, and so I enrolled in university at George Washington University and began my career of becoming an architect. And the following year I transferred to North Carolina State in Raleigh, and in 1960, when by the time I had got to California, I became a licensed architect in California and opened up an office, which still carries my name, although I retired from it a little bit less than 4 years ago. My younger partner took it over. Still is Garcia and Wagner and Associates, architects and planners in San Francisco. And I retired on the very day, 40 years later, after I came to the United States. On the 30th of September, 1986, I retired from my business, which I had begun in 1960. So 26 years later, but after I started my business, but 40 years later to the day when I arrived in New York City, I retired. And I chose that date specifically when it became about because I thought these were rather important dates in my life.
Yes, they were. Well, thank you very much, Max. That's very interesting and very enlightening to me. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Glad to do so.